So behind every uniform is a nervous system, and behind every call answered is a human being. Trauma doesn't always announce itself, but healing should never feel out of reach. So welcome to the ChronoScape podcast, where we explore the technologies, therapies, and human stories, reshaping recovery for veterans and first responders. This space exists for one reason: to move the conversation forward and bring better tools to the people who give so much of themselves in service to others. And today we have Blake Miles, the founder. He made history as the youngest Green Beret in U.S. history. I wanted to ask you right away, I want you to tell me who you were as a kid. Because like I said, the research I did on the Green Beret, in order for you to be the youngest one, I have an idea now what you had to do. I would love to know what you were like as a kid.
That's something I've been trying to sort through myself.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think the core elements of me as a kid would have been baseball with my dad and my mom, really. And I remember like playing in the Indianapolis, it was Greenwood, suburb of Indianapolis. And that league was I had a lot of fun in that league. But I remember that was the place where I first started to feel confident, and beyond just playing the game, I was good in the field. Fielding was probably my strongest suit, and I never caught up to hitting until, my later years, I guess. But fielding was something I was always really confident, and I remember, a few specific plays, just making random diving catches that, the whole crowd goes crazy. And I love baseball. Baseball was a really good sport for me, and I enjoy the teamwork aspect of it. Beyond that, I probably got into computers around the age of 7. Two of my uncles got me into them. And so started using like DOS and, the very first Windows 3.1 when that came out, starting to learn that. And I got into Doom or Wolfenstein 3D before that. And so with that, Nintendo was a big part of it. And I remember a lot of hours playing like Legend of Zelda 2 and Guerrilla War and Mario. So, games were a big part of my upbringing. Not just, video games, but, playing games and running around outside. It was before the internet. So I got to taste that life. I think Chase, I don't know. How old are you, Chase?
I'm 41 in May. Yep.
Okay. All right. So we're the same age. So we all tasted that life pre-internet.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a garden hose kid.
I just turned 41 in September, and then Blake, you're 1 year.
41 in August.
We literally are all the same age.
Yeah.
All around the same time. All garden hose babies, latchkey kids.
That's awesome.
So like, I think the growing up in that world, I think it gave me a taste of, what, how things could be, or how things were, I guess you could say. And I started wrestling in middle school.
Oh, yeah, okay.
I was too short to play basketball. Something that I learned. I thought that I could just play, but apparently I was not good at basketball. So fortunately, I got cut from the 6th grade team and joined the wrestling team. And then I think one of my first matches, I was wrestling. I weighed 60 pounds my 6th grade year. So I was wrestling the 70. I had to wrestle up in the 70, normally the 70, but there wasn't a 70-pound JV kid. So I had to wrestle the 75-pounder from Zionsville, and he broke my elbow in 30 seconds. And that was like the third match of my 6th grade year. So and it was a separation. It wasn't like a bad break. He just like slammed me down and my hand twisted. And yeah, I got pinned after about 30 seconds of that. But so 7th grade year, I came back, and there was a 6th grader that had been wrestling his whole life. That was another 70-pounder. So Joe and I started wrestling together, and he kicked my ass on a daily basis, and it made me a lot stronger. But like with wrestling, my 7th and 8th grade year, I came back and won the sectional championships. So like that gave me a big boost of confidence in the physical arena. And then getting to high school wrestling is just an entirely different animal. And I think I walked away around a 500, and that was about it. Or win-loss average 500, 50%. Yeah. So yeah, I didn't do great. I think I made it whatever's after sectionals, regionals. Yeah, I made it to regionals.
Okay. Yeah.
like my junior and senior year. So
you
I think it's kind of interesting that you're asking about this because the working on ChronoScape has led me down a lot of these memories of like how did I end up here type questions. One of the things I think is kind of actually important was, me getting into the internet very early. I was at the forefront of figuring out LimeWire. It wasn't LimeWire. It was Napster.
Napster.
Yeah. So I figured out Napster and Winamp and started burning CDs before anyone knew
Heck yes.
what was going on. So I started like giving them out to friends and selling them. And I'm like slinging discs out in the corner.
Please tell me you had a trench coat and we were
Oh,
lined up on the trench coat, because that's kind of
would have been a good idea. That would have been a good idea. Like that would have been a good way to, hey buddy,
That
what do
was
you
about
want?
the time of
well. So
Neo, wasn't it? From
Yeah,
the
if I would have been
Matrix.
trench coat at that time would have signified something different.
A little something different.
Yeah.
yes, okay. So what I'm hearing already is like your experience in baseball and for wrestling. I mean, Chase and I both have a kid the same age in the same town, so that's our common. We're both in the stands watching the wrestling. Um, and I'm obsessed with it now. It's an incredible, mentally, physically challenging sport. So again, it gives me this.
It takes you one season,
of
and everybody
who
turns
you
into a
are.
wrestling fan, right?
Yes, I am. Like I'm not.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go after high school. Did you go right into Army and Special Forces?
Yeah, I enlisted about April of my senior year is when I actually swore in.
Wow. Okay.
Guided you through that process, Blake?
What's that?
Who guided you through that process?
That would have been
Because you don't
Sergeant
go
Wallace, Sergeant Darius Wallace.
And what was
Amazing.
different about that process than I would say somebody else's? Did you get pulled out from that? Why did you have the opportunities that you had?
So the baseline, like you had to have a 110, 115 GT score, general technical. And I don't know, I ended up with an 89 on the ASVAB. So once I wanted a Ranger contract at first, they didn't have any, but they were like, but we do have this new 18 X-ray Special Forces recruit contract. And I'm like, I have no idea what that is, but yeah, like because I think my original thoughts and enlisting was it was right after 9/11 happened, our senior year, my senior year anyway. So that was kind of that shaped everything externally. And I applied to Indiana University. That was the only school I applied to. I wasn't paying attention or really caring in high school educationally. There was like my the honors history. The honors history teacher also taught honors economics and honors, like basically a full spectrum of different courses your junior and senior year, but it's basically all analytical writing and basically writing papers about different things. That was the one class I did care about, but everything else I was just kind of like blowing off. Other than etymology, I liked etymology for whatever reason, still do. But so that was kind of my formative thing. I don't remember. It was like 1100 something on my SATs, so I was hoping that would get me in. That plus my GPA did not get me in. So
What? Okay.
yeah, so I was just like, all right, well, I remember the night that the FAFSA documents were due. I was out partying with friends, and they're like, hey, dude, did you get your FAFSA done? I'm like, that's due tonight, isn't it? I'm like, yeah. Fuck. All right, so I race home at like 10:30, jump on my computer and dial up my 28.8 modem and try to log into a federal website to accomplish something in a short amount. That did not happen. So I was like, all right, well, I went
Absolutely not.
downstairs right when I realized that it ain't happening. I'm not getting this done before midnight. And there was an Air Force recruiting brochure. I'm like, I'll be a pilot. I had no idea what I was saying. I grew up watching Top Gun. It was the thing. Oh, want to be a pilot at first. Obviously, that ain't going to happen without a college degree. So I watched a lot of Band of Brothers and Black Hawk Down and all the war movies, Saving Private Ryan. So I was properly primed. We'll put it that way. So yeah, I went to the recruiter station and went to MEPS looking for a Ranger contract. Didn't have it once I passed the test, but they had the 18 X-ray, and I just needed to take the language aptitude test, and I passed that one. So they put it on the table. And so the contract was infantry basic airborne school and a slot at a selection preparation course. And if I make it through all that, I get to go to selection. And if I don't make it, then I go back to 82nd Airborne or some other. If I'm lucky, I'll end up at Italy. That was my fallback hope. Yeah, 173rd out of Italy was an airborne unit. But basically, everybody that didn't make it through selection or whatever, 82nd Airborne was where they ended up for the most part.
So you did make it through.
I did, yeah.
Okay, and excelled probably pretty quickly. Yeah, you're not going to.
No, well, this is actually, this ain't me being humble on this one.
Okay.
I got to the team. I got to group first, and I had a conversation with the sergeant major, and before I knew it, they threw me in the headquarters operations shop as like just an administrative role. And I looking back on it, I think they were just testing me to see if I was just, if I slipped through the cracks. So
if you're a goofball.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Which
Try to see if you were a goofball or not, right?
I will. Yeah. A goofball you can trust versus a goofball you can't. You got a handhold. That's two different things. But I did all right with that. I learned how to use some Microsoft database products that I'd never touched before, and eventually they're like, "All right, you're going to a team." So basically, when I was first being walked around and introduced to the other teams, like, there's one of the liaisons and they're doing a train up for just an urban combat type mission locally, training mission. And so they're all in their team rooms separated from each other. So the liaison was bringing me around to each different team room and he's doing his job, but he's just bringing me along to introduce to the guys. And I remember the very first team room I walked into, they all kind of turned and saw him, looked at me, and they're like, "Hey, that's cool. You brought your kid to work today, and you even gave him a uniform. That's adorable." And so that was the very first, like, welcome to group, kid. And it took me. There was one specific event. We were, this is like a year into the team, and we had gone to Korea. We had gone to Crystal Mountain up in Washington for cold weather training. We went to Florida for Call for Fire school and Griffin driving school and all this other stuff. So, I'm on what they don't tell guys when they join teams is, hey, you're going to be a demolitions guy and play with explosives and stuff. But when you actually get to the team, it's like, surprise, you're actually the logistics and supply guy of the team. And I'm terrible with supply and logistics, and I'm losing keys all the time. So I was not a great engineer in that respect. But I remember there was this one point, one of the other teams came down the hall, and they were just messing with me, and our senior medic was he chirped back at him. He's like, "Hey, Blake's he's gone through like 3 mobilizations now or something to that effect, and he's good." It was just that moment I was like, "All right, I'm not gonna walk in the company and find my stuff out in the hallway because I'm a garbage bag." I don't know if we can swear here, so
Why not?
the standard military term is a shitbag.
Yes.
Okay.
If I was a shitbag or not. Yeah, that was always the driving fear. And I think, these are good questions, Kelly, because you're the determination that drove me to get through the Q course was primarily fear, like fear of failure.
Wow.
I think more, and it's like a mix of fear of failure that blurs of like letting the guys around you and failing for them. So it's like a mix of that and not wanting to go back with an L,
Yeah.
So
I love that you know that.
Yeah, I've distilled that one down pretty well. But the cost of that it's something that doesn't go away. And so it doesn't go away easily. So there's always that nagging, like, what am I failing today? And so it can have a negative, pessimistic lens that it sorts to shape.
Blake, may I make an inference here? You were a young man who was then thrusted into a grown man's world. You were the youngest Green Beret in American history. You joined a team.
Yeah, I gotta say, I don't know that for sure, but it's possible. I don't know the statistic, but I
Somebody
hesitate to
prove me
make that
wrong because
claim.
I can't find it anywhere else. So I'm
Fair
making the
enough.
claim
You,
for
you
you.
guys can make
Yeah,
that claim, and
I'm making the claim.
I made my caveat.
Yes, I have not been able to find that to be disproven yet. So if there is somebody younger, please let us know. We would love to see that. Anyway, we can see that this drive that you have of the fear of failure, right? You said it several times. Do you feel like you said that still drives you today? That doesn't ever
That's a
go away,
cost.
Yeah,
right?
it was something I had to work through. It's definitely not. I can feel it at times, but it's definitely not a driving factor. It's I think it's been replaced more, a God focused perspective more than anything. It's fear of failing at that level.
Okay.
So that's interesting. I started off in the Corps, in the Marine Corps. I wanted to be one of those shiny dudes you saw on TV for the few, the proud, right? Whenever they also offered the quickest ship out date. So I was ready to go.
The
Whenever I
Marines know their
graduated.
audience.
They sure do. But for us, they had the Raiders whenever I went in. They came underneath a different flag whenever I was in special operations in the Marine Corps, which you can call that, was considered MARSOC at the time, morphed into MARSOC. And you had to be a 4 to be able to, raise your hand and say, I want to try out. To go through the selection process for that. It was very different. 18 being a young man, who is growing and being morphed, in the way that you view yourself and the world. It's kind of shows as your friend. It kind of shows whenever you're working on projects and stuff. You're always very mission oriented and very focused on where you need to be and where you're going. That must be the logistician in you that got trained into you.
Yeah.
Which I appreciate.
Yeah. And actually, kind of along those same lines, during the engineering course, the first moment that I actually thought maybe I haven't slipped through the cracks was the target analysis portion of the course. And the engineering course is like 3 months long or 3, I don't know. I think it's 3 months long, but the target analysis portion was after all the demolition phase. And that's what weeds out most guys because they don't make it past the math portion of it. But the target analysis stuff is they give you a matrix, and the matrix, it's Carver matrix, but the purpose of the matrix is to identify the best target to go after. Let's say you go into a foreign country and you're attacking the government or attacking some whatever. This gives you a way to assign values to different variables of different targets. So like, should we hit the power lines? Should we hit the rail lines? Like what do we go after? And so you just sit around and you put all these different potential targets up on the board, and you just sit around and debate what the number values should be and why. And that was the first moment that I actually felt like very confident in the words that were coming out of my mouth and not feeling like an absolute idiot in front of, guys that are, 5, 10 years older than me, much more experienced. So, and I don't know exactly why, but when I started offering my analysis on the things, the other guys listened and it resonated, and it didn't have that same sort of like, who the what's the baby saying, why is he trying to talk right now, and it wasn't ever really like that, like explicitly, but
Oh, it's there.
it's there. I mean,
Yeah.
I weighed 150. I'm 5'8". I'm 19 years old at the time, so I'm not exactly blending in with my environment.
Next to guys that are 6 foot,
Yeah, like
220,
and that
230.
was in the X-ray programs. Like when I get the basic training, and our company is, basic training company is 4 platoons, 50 guys each platoon, and every platoon had like a subsection of X-rays, and so we had X-rays in my company. Whoa! We had college athletes, like Division I athletes.
Wow.
What my one The dude next to me in the bunk, Matt, who I became good friends with, had like a a major in physics and some other thing from Berkeley.
Really?
Yeah.
Already?
Yeah, no, just like completely surrounded by either absolute brilliant dudes or studs that also were brilliant at the same time. And of that 58, 8 of us made it to group. And me and my buddy Cody, we were the only two that made it out of high school.
Okay, so we know like a fiery determination. Just for fun, do you know your zodiac sign?
Leo.
Okay, cool. I just wanted to I have a lot of Leo friends. So a ton of determination, but here's kind of a different skew of question for you. When you're operating at that level, I know you talked about the cost, the fear of failure, which is an amazing self awareness piece. Are you aware, even now in retrospect, what parts of yourself you had to shut down to operate at that level?
Good one.
Yeah, it is a really good question. I don't think I like, I can't verbalize what it was, but it's something to do with that. Like I remember the month prior to going to group, I'm getting ready with, my, and what is we got engaged basically after I graduated SEER school sometime after that.
You
And
and your wife?
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So we were. I went back home to Indiana. I had a month of leave before I was going over to Washington to go to group. And I remember that month being very extremely anxiety ridden. Like and I remember telling Aaron about it. It's just like this fear of I'm gonna get there and they're gonna like this dude slip through the cracks and my stuff's gonna be in the hallway one day. And that was just like it was just a drum beat, boom, 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 boom. And so I think actually I know how to answer it now. You pulled it out of me.
Great.
It's the recognition that something undesirable could potentially happening and just flipping the switch and ignoring it. And not really dwelling on what could happen, just making guardrails for the potential outcomes and thinking in probabilistics of what's the most likely outcome, what could happen, and creating those sorts of probabilistic based guardrails. Like, how serious is the threat? How likely is the threat? All right, then I'll just devote a portion of my mental energy to that as well. And so I think probably I sacrificed my ability to just sit back and enjoy life.
Oh, that's huge.
But it's so that was the cost, but now I feel like I'm past that to where I can look back and the things are in better perspective. So it's easy to enjoy life and find little joys and things, and those are great. But at the same time, I can't turn off my radar. My radar
Sure.
is constantly on.
Yeah, yeah.
Blake, would you
That
say
makes
that
sense.
you're never satisfied with what you produce?
No, no, I think if anything, I'm probably too satisfied. I'm like, it's good. Like I get to that 80%, I get to that 80% level. I'm like, it's good. Someone else can figure this out.
Like spent like it's almost like you climbed to Mount Everest just like faster and like super determined, and then you got there and like, well, I'm good now.
Yeah, yeah.
Like with everything else, like you already climbed your biggest thing, and is there like fatigue even a little bit?
I think that sets in like day to day type subtlety
Yeah.
things. Like we're kind of right now. Yesterday, I was telling Chase about this the other day. I was just me and one of my agents I'm trying to build out one of these websites for something and just keep running into errors and I can't get it's basically me bashing my head into a wall of electricity and there's nothing coming out. So, I just get exasperated with stuff. Like if I can't fix it the way I think it should be, that's when I start to get frustrated and then I just take a step back. And so I don't know if that answers the question, but I think
Well, real quick, when you say agents, you're talking about AI agents,
yes.
right?
Sorry.
Just
Yeah.
for everyone to
Yeah, I didn't.
understand.
We haven't broached that subject a lot, so I just kind of threw it in there without thinking. But yeah, artificial intelligence. I got a detachment, as I call it, of agents that I'm managing for 4D strategies.
Yeah, it's brilliant. It's awesome.
Thank you.
And we'll get to ChronoScape. I wanted
Well,
to
I'm enjoying the history stuff.
yeah, that's like such a part of it because again, our whole point is, the tools that you guys are creating, there are real humans, there are real people, there are real one-time little kids in these bodies. And I would guess that most everyone had the best of intentions. You know, you talked about your senior year. For me, it was my junior year. I remember it was math class, and the Twin Towers news came on. That shook a lot of people. You just happened to be at the right age, primed up, like, yes, I will go help our country. You know, and all these first responders.
I don't remember it being like an option though, Kelly. Like
Really?
a lot of people, Blake can correct me if I'm wrong, but like there was a lot of, I mean, I graduated in, 03, and there was a lot of us that went down that were like, no, it's time.
Okay.
It's time to go.
I think for me, I think the year after me, it sounds like, I think it probably escalated.
Okay, so that would be Chase and I. And I was I'm a woman, and my goal, as you guys know, was to go on and be a reporter. So I had like a different set, like a different mindset around it. And I didn't think about how I could go. Well, that was also a little prior to more women joining the force. I know that's a much different conversation now, but yeah, for me, it was going into so I appreciate you saying that, Chase, because I don't think I realized that it was just like, you guys are doing this.
Well,
that makes sense.
I can't say that for Blake. That's how it was for us.
Yeah.
Like, like I remember sitting around my senior year and everybody say, what are we doing? Why don't we just go get our GEDs? Let's just go get our, like we had conversations, in November, December about getting our GEDs and just enlisting.
Wow.
Just to join faster.
Yeah.
Of course, they were handing out nice contracts, around that time. Let's not placate. There was some of that wanted to be, there was some of us that wanted to go in, and I'm sure there were some. I'm not going to include myself in that. There were some that wanted to go and be a hero. There's some of us that felt the draw to go, and also it was a nice paycheck as well. Okay. Good, secure future. Yeah. And that's the way I looked at it going in.
I almost think you kind of have to, because otherwise it's a very big ask.
I think that's a very good point, because I think looking at the group of the 58 that I mentioned in my basic training company, the guys that made it through, you could kind of get a sense early on. Like I remember Matt Docchio, he was one of them specifically. He was like a division 1 football player. Brilliant dude, just great to be around, funny as hell, was not afraid of the drill sergeants, which made it even more funny. But like you could tell certain guys that had a specific quality, and you could just kind of track them along. But I think the thing with all of them, it was they didn't join because they wanted to have a pretty colored hat, a fancy hat that other people would notice. There was something deeper at the core that would not just wither away when the mile whatever march you're on starts to dwindle away and you don't know when you're stopping because you weren't told when to stop. So like that's the sort of thing that, like, looking back at the ones that were successful had that core driving factor that kept them going.
Yeah.
And as I say that, like, I guess I didn't really clarify what that was for me, other than just that fear of, failing, going back and saying, yeah, I didn't make it.
So with that, your motivation, to not, that was your motivation. Like, I don't want to fail this, because you had a natural sense of discipline as a young guy, determination. Was there anything or any moment that you realized you couldn't just out discipline this? It took, like, you had to dig.
Actually, I think it would be more accurate to say that I have a discipline in like MacGyver type stuff.
Okay.
And that actually saved me more times than not. And it's this sort of like creative on the fly. I call it chaos engineering. And I called it that even before I figured out what anything about Warhammer, which I'm deep down that rabbit hole now. But chaos engineering is like a thing, and it's basically if you will it to happen, you'll find a way to make it happen. And that was so, like, an example. There was, to show how undisciplined I was, one of the during the preparation course, we had a land navigation phase where we get taken out in trucks and dropped off, and everyone gets your map, your compass, your protractor, and you get your initial point and go. And everyone just goes off into the woods by themselves with, 50, 60 pounds and a rubber duck rifle, a fake rifle in their hand in case they lose it. It's not.
Okay.
So I get my point. I sit down. I don't have my pencil. Awesome. I am screwed because at this point, it's cadres are like, don't talk to anybody. And if you go asking the cadre for a pencil, you might as well just
You're
say, I'm done. So I'm like, well, I'm screwed.
good.
But then I'm
You
like,
showed
wait,
up unprepared.
I go grab a pine twig or a pine stick, about yay long, shave it down, get a lighter, light it up. I got myself a pencil. And I still have that somewhere in my safe. I saved it. So like it's, basically coming up with creative solutions to the problems that I create
Huh?
rapidly. And sometimes it's even better than what I started off with.
Heck yes. Okay, so this I'm very excited. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Chase.
So Blake, you solve your own problems that you create. Is that like a superhero
It's like
power that you have? I have ability to MacGyver my way out of the problems I create for myself.
I've caused so many of my own problems that I've had to get myself out of that I've gotten really good at solving problems for myself and others.
I kind of love that. And how else would you know how to be such a good problem solver without like a ton of practice? So that's what brings me. So that all just like really excited me. First of all, that's kind of what special forces is, right? Like you're doing the assignments that are unique and different and secretive and costly and dangerous and all the things. And
a very dynamic tool for a very dynamic problem set.
Okay, so because we're all the same age, I actually did not remember that I even did this until my boyfriend, when we first got together, I went through this box of memorabilia from my childhood and pulled out my Precious Moments Bible and my cross country medals, etc. But one thing that came out was this certificate for a team. And again, remember, I only had like 250 people in my whole high school. I was actually on a team called Future Problem Solvers of America. Did you guys remember that?
Mm-mm.
Did you ever? No one's ever heard of this. I didn't remember doing this, but it was actually my cross country coach who was an amazing teacher, mentor, positive guy. And if think about cross country anyway, Chase, your wife is like,
I ran cross country in middle school. Yeah.
So see, that tells me even more about
you.
It's
learned a lot from that one. Yeah.
Right? Talk about learning mental coping skills at a very freaking young age. Yeah. Okay. So that same coach was the one that did the Future Problem Solvers of America. And so in a certain way, it's kind of like being a mathlete, like on this mathlete club.
Yeah.
Anyways, I learned so much and it's almost like, so I went on to get my master's later in life, but it reminds me like it forces you to think a certain way. Like, so what you were just talking about with problem solving and MacGyver, either it was natural to you or it forced you to think a certain way. Not everyone has that, literally. To have the skill of problem solving, it doesn't matter if you created them, it's still a skill to create.
Sometimes it does, but yeah, no,
And so
I was just say like I lost it. Sorry, you go ahead.
That is okay. So one thing I wanted to do is I feel like a common theme and the people in the group that you guys want to help more, trauma is a common theme. So instead of like sharing everyone's, like no one really needs to, it's certainly not to minimize or take away because it was intense and real and you guys live with symptoms every day. But instead of going through like what your specific trauma was, can you almost like skip over it and tell me like, okay, so from special forces and transitioning back into like civilian, real world civilian life, because specifically being a Green Beret, special forces, like I'm guessing you couldn't even say the word weakness or I need help or any of those words. So transitioning then to the real world, what was that transition that led you to like, okay, I don't know how to say this. I need help. And is that Am I asking that okay?
No, yeah, no, you're I think the step-by-step explanation would take a long time, and
Sure. Okay.
but I think the higher level abstraction of my transition, I think it would be, so when I first got out, I had an L5S1 hernia that started to deteriorate like on the drive home to Indiana from Washington. And so I had an intelligence contracting gig lined up in Great Lakes, which would have been perfect. And like 1 month before that was going to start, like I got out in June, drove home. This role was lined up for like August. And then in July, I got the message that the contract got canceled. So then it went into search mode again. And my wife was going to school up into the Chicago area. So that was kind of where I was centering my focus. And I don't think, like, I think the biggest problem I had up front was not understanding what value proposition I brought to the table and being able to like verbalize it in a language that made sense to normal non-military speaking humans.
Yeah.
And two, just not even understanding what businesses value to begin with so that they could pay me for the skills that I have. And
Yeah.
so a lot of my search was trying to figure out what I want, or trying to find something that I actually wanted to do. But that is like, my wife especially would always remind me of like, well, you didn't pay your dues yet, or something to that effect. And it's like, well, yeah, I get that, but, and then I start going down all the reasons why I think I think the baseline start of my problem getting out of the military, I started a job working at Uline. The first job I could find was warehouse floor, just packing the warehouse floor. And so that was cool. It was a job, whatever. I was like, all right, I can work my way up here. There's places to go in here. Then I start working, and I'm like, I'm looking around at the frontline leaders, and I realize, they're the same age as me. They have college degrees. All right, so I go to HR. I'm like, hey, can I be a frontline leader? What do I need to do that? Like, sorry, you got to have a college degree. I've got 5 years of military. In fact, like 12 months ago, I was leading Iraqi troops in Arabic,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
without an interpreter on
How
operation.
about that? What
So
about
like,
that?
so does that qualify me for? No, it does, because
Nope, it sure doesn't.
the HR doesn't care what you think. So that was my first like kind of wake up call of like, all right, the real world is not the same as the military world, so I have to adjust accordingly. So I eventually got surgery for that through the Uline medical care, which that I'm very thankful for that, because I walked out of the surgery feeling fine and haven't had any problems with it since. But at the time, I did get a I mean, a big addiction to Vicodins. So I was gobbling like 12 Vicodins a day to make it through work, or, at least that was my justification. So eventually stopped that after leaving Uline, and started working as a contract, like a monthly contractor with the National Guard Special Forces unit that was out of Chicago. And then that got me into recruiting, and, then I'd start going down the very many steps that led me to where I'm at now. But I think going back to the higher level abstraction, that was my starting point, and that led me down a lot of the various pathways that I've went down. But I think kind of what you were talking about earlier, Kelly, the injustice piece, like, rooting for the underdog, or actively fighting for the underdog. I think that's kind of been something that I've found myself being attracted to in a number of areas. But yeah, I think asking for help is definitely one of those things that is not common to us, or from like the special operations community. But we're always willing to help. It's like, but at the same time, we're broken ourselves, and we're unwilling to admit that we're probably broken in a variety of ways, but we compensate it for it in different ways, and put on the mask like we always do, and just keep marching on. So
now I'm guessing you have a different definition of strength.
yeah, I think I always kind of, being small statured, I think I always put more more focus on, going to like a Dungeons and Dragons setup. Hey, I didn't roll great. I rolled average on the body type, but I got a good roll on dexterity. So I make up for it in finesse and wit. And so I think strength and not only understanding what you bring to the table, but how to amplify the dynamics of others that you're working with. I think one thing I didn't mention, and it kind of came up a little bit in different ways, and you kind of brought it up, but like a core thing that I built myself around as a young lad, young Blake. In high school, I started playing online role-playing games. And so, like, I don't know if you know EverQuest. Before EverQuest, so you know World of Warcraft, right?
Uh-huh.
Well, before World of Warcraft, there was EverQuest. That was like, it came out
Okay.
in 99. It was like the first 3D online role-playing game, and it was massive. But before that, there was a game called Underlight that I played, and it was basically the same graphics as Doom. But the thing about that game was it was all player driven, and in order to learn a new skill, you had to go to another player that earned the rank of a teacher and ask them for a task to learn this new skill or to advance a new skill or to advance past a certain point. And they would create like a task and hand it to you, and you'd have to go accomplish this task and bring it back to them. And that game forced me to, because you can't progress in that game unless you act like an adult. Like you run around acting like a kid, they're like, go away, kid, we don't want you here. We're not gonna teach you a new skill because you're acting like a kid. So it forced me to like interact with adults in a mature way. And in a lot of way, I think that game, and then moving into EverQuest, it's the same thing, just on a larger scale. You're interacting with mature people to accomplish very mission specific tasks with a variety of unknown variables that you don't know what's going to happen. And you're dealing with other people that you don't know what's going to happen. And you're dealing with internet connectivity issues, and you might just drop out, and the raid wipes because the healer's internet got shut off because whatever. So like, I think looking back at my formative years, those sorts of video games were something that helped prepare me to have a better understanding of where strength can actually be found, and like because when I was on the teams and going through the Q course, I think more than anything, my role in those types of environments was like morale, like just keeping the mood up, because South Park and Chappelle's Show were big at the time, and you know, a properly timed South Park quote can take
Yeah.
the team's mood from just like, this is absolute bullshit, to yeah, this is hilarious.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like finding those moments, just like the jester, and